Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Do the Change podcast. So it's basically a podcast where we're challenging and reimagining OEHS. And so this podcast really focuses on highlighting upcoming leaders in their field and how they got to where they are today, with a special focus on the field of occupational health and environmental sciences. But we're also going to be touching on topics that are kind of more on the broader kind of outskirts of that field as well. And so, yeah, we're gonna be talking about the hills and the valleys of these like speakers' journeys and also get some insight onto some non-traditional paths into the field. So my name is Tyra Parrish. I'm a recent grad in the MPH program here at Cal. Woo! And my first guest speaker on this podcast is Camila De Pierola. And so let me tell you about Camila, because she's super amazing. So Camila graduated from LMU, Loyola Marymount University, in 2020, and she has also recently earned her master's in public health at UC Berkeley in spring of 2023. So congratulations. And this fall, she will begin her medical school journey at UC Berkeley's UCSF medical program. So while at LMU, she was an active social justice advocate, specifically leading the Immigration Club Resilience, institutionalizing support for undocumented students, and advocating at the legislative level. And so, inspired by her work at LMU and her experience as an immigrant from Peru, she also founded the Undocu Network through the nonprofit the Nation Solidarity Network. And this Undocu Network is a national support group for undocumented young adults with aims to provide resources, build community, and mitigate adverse mental health outcomes through social connection. Camila's collaborative efforts also led her to pursue an MPH to dive deeper into health disparities work, which is awesome. And there she expanded her research and gained insight on social, environmental, and structural factors impacting health, particularly that of minoritized groups. And so her goal as a medical student and a future physician is to intentionally promote health equity across the healthcare system and academic institutions while also undoing policies that uphold oppression. So what haven't you done yet? So welcome to the show. So to kick it off, I want to start with just a check-in question, just to kind of just start off on just a different note, just to kind of spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to spin this little wheel. You can't do that, can you? So the question is, what is one thing you've done recently to step outside of your comfort zone?
Well, first, thank you for having me on this podcast.
Nice.
Buy some time to think about that question.
Right.
One thing out of my comfort zone. So I actually am I'm collaborating on a research project within the field of sociology.
Okay.
I didn't major in sociology. I've only taken some classes and, have delved into books and professors that talk about sociology and teach sociology, and learning from that. So that kind of pushed me to take a sort of go out of my comfort zone of either medicine and public health or psychology. So now I'm working on that project this summer, and I'm really excited about it because I'm going to be learning a lot from professor and also my peers that are going to be that I'll be working with as well. So sociology is a really big and complicated field, and it is kind of intimidating, but I'm really excited to learn more about that and being able to apply it to my future work also.
Yeah, I mean, sociology is literally in everything.
Yeah,
so definitely.
It is everything.
Literally, yeah. So that's going to be, yes, that's awesome. Okay, so we're just gonna, actually, maybe I should share with something I've done stuff outside of my comfort zone. I think for me, I mean, it's not on that level, but it's very small. I did this morning. I like drank coffee. It's just a lot for me because I don't drink coffee, but I did, and now I kind of get the hype a little bit, and I'm a little scared because I was like trying to avoid the like, oh, I drink coffee every day, but I see it now. Like I tried something with brown sugar or something at Starbucks. It was pretty good. Yeah, it was good. So
just in moderation,
In moderation, yeah. But like I'm a noob, so I might just jump at first. Okay, so I'm just gonna jump into the first question. So these questions are more tailored towards kind of like the journey aspect of where you got to. So yeah, so a lot of people take very traditional paths into their careers, but again, the podcast really focuses on exploring the really non-traditional paths that aren't as kind of straightforward cutter. So first question, did you take a non-traditional approach into this field? And could you talk a little bit more about that and how it's influenced your perspective? Maybe if you've seen like folks go the traditional route versus the route you went. And yeah, and then just walk us through your journey. So we mentioned it a bit from LMU to Berkeley. So yeah, go ahead, start reading.
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to pursue medicine
Yeah.
since I was 8 years old. That's a really weird story. Long story short, when I was 8, I was able to witness the birth of my little brother, and most kids would be screaming and crying, but I was
Yeah.
fascinated by everything that happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that kind of led me on this path. And then obviously in college, I focused more on that and went into college as pre-med.
Yeah.
But I didn't choose a traditional STEM major. I actually chose psychology with a biochemistry minor.
Okay.
And I chose psychology because I didn't want to invest 150% of my time in STEM, because I
Fair.
knew I was taking those courses anyways, right? So I wanted to, get more, different perspectives. And then I also really love psychology because I wanted, the whole, at the time, what I wanted to do was really understand why people do the things they do and why,
Yeah.
actually, in the context of injustice, why do people think that is right? What are the motives behind injustice, and the atrocities we see in everyday life and
Mhm.
historically? And so even though I was pre-med in undergrad, my route to public health was completely spontaneous. I didn't know what public health was. I had to Google it as I was applying to Berkeley. Full transparency.
Yeah.
But a lot of the work that I was doing at LMU um, was public health work. I was creating initiatives for the undocumented community, trying to direct resources to them in order to not only help them in their academic work and career development, but also in terms of their health and their mental well-being.
Yeah.
Because a lot of like overlap of all these issues, academics, jobs, etc., on top of one's immigration status as well. So I realized with the help of my friends that was public health work, and that's why I decided, after graduating, I took one gap year, I guess you could. I was doing a post-bac at a local
Yeah.
community college to finish my prereqs for medical school.
Uh-huh.
And during that year, I was doing more of that work with the undocumented community. And so that's really where I decided, I'm going to do a master's in public health to gain more knowledge, and insight on the different factors impacting health,
Yeah.
uh, and then apply that, be able to apply that to medical school in my journey there as well. So public health definitely was not even a thought until recently. And I think
Yeah.
for most people too, I think, especially people in our cohort, right? I think the pandemic really inspired people to pursue public health, after everything
Right.
that was. So, and then medicine pre-med was a battle, but we're here now.
But you
And
won it because you're in medical school now.
there was a vision, but there were a lot of things that were not expected throughout.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, more or less linear, traditional, but also not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, or actually, I wanted to touch on a little bit more because you said that or it was mentioned that you started the Undocu Network. And so I would love if you can, one, just kind of for those folks who just don't know what undocumented means and like what particular like unique barriers and obstacles like folks in that community face. Do you mind just like touching on that real quick? Because it may be someone's first time hearing or getting a more concrete definition of what that means.
Yeah, so being undocumented in the United States means that you do not hold citizenship or residency status or any sort of visa in the United States, but you
Mhm.
reside. And so I created the Undocu network through the Ignatian Solidarity Network, which is this
Right.
national nonprofit, basically through a need during the pandemic. At LMU, I did a lot of work with the undocumented community and the students there, and
Mhm.
created a support group during the summer, during the first year after the pandemic, to keep our community connected
Yeah.
with the school, and also just, you know, a lot of like uncertainties, especially with a lot of you know, undocumented people not having access to health insurance, losing
Right.
jobs, work becoming more difficult, increased, you know, fear of deportation, all that kind of stuff, right? So
Right.
that support group inspired me to take it to the national level, thinking, you know, there's a lot of undocumented students at these other Jesuit universities across the country that may
Mhm.
not have as much support as the students at LMU do. There may
Right.
be, they may know one or two or no other undocumented students there, and, you know, they really want and need this support. And so I figured, why not, you know, create a sort of mutual aid type of network that would benefit everyone,
Yeah.
and guide each other through not just
Yeah.
but also just you know, our careers and life and things like that.
Yeah. I think that program is really awesome because like just like you said, where one just kind of the experience of being undocumented is super unique. And then also when you really start concentrating it at like specific Jesuit universities, depending on where they're at, like
Mhm.
California Jesuit universities might be a little bit more progressive compared to Jesuit universities that maybe on the East Coast, because like, I know there's like one in Boston or something like that. So that's really dope that you're just connecting undocumented folks at different universities that may experience or protect students in different ways and could help kind of like cross, I don't say cross pollinate because that's not a good word, but like cross it's like resources or
Environmental health is coming out.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No,
Pollination bees. Bees are
it's
dying.
it's really cool. We meet bi-weekly over Zoom still to this day. So we've been going 3 years
Yeah.
now. And in the past 2 years, we've been able to allocate funds in order to have an in-person summit. So we've had two
Oh, cool.
annual in-person summits where we've had the first summit, we had about 25 students fly into California from around the country.
Hmm.
And then this past February, we had 40 students fly in, 40 undocumented students come from all over the country to attend the summit.
Yeah.
Have you know, workshops, build community, get to know each other in person, and talk about things that a lot of other people would not understand or relate.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Like that's, I can only imagine how those students like feel having that support and also having support from those who reflect the community that they also are a part of, or that's part of their identity.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's really awesome. So I'm going to jump or shift kind of back into this conversation about like your journey and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like, were there any specific challenges or obstacles that you faced kind of in your path to, or yeah, in your path to where you're at now? How did you overcome them? And like, what lessons did you learn from those experiences?
There were a lot of challenges and obstacles.
Whatever you feel comfortable.
I
This
think
is a safe space.
I don't think there's a single pre-med that tells you there are no challenges.
Yeah, I would think they're lying. I'm like, you're lying. Just the MCAT is a challenge, please.
Any point.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest challenges during my undergraduate was seeing how medicine can be a form of social justice in practice.
Yeah.
Uh, because in my pre-med classes, you know, you have to do biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, all
Yeah.
these things, right? You're learning about how the body works, how cells work, etc. Not necessarily medicine or diagnosing, but, you know, the basic stuff. And you don't, at least I couldn't really see how that connected with health disparities, how that connected with racism in medicine, how that connected with, you know, poor health outcomes in minoritized communities, and why are there policies that support, you know, this sort of oppression among groups, or why are there is there access for certain groups and not for others. I couldn't see the connection between this molecule I'm learning in organic chemistry. It's like the lives of real people that are being
Yeah.
and that was a challenge that I navigated by seeking internships within the communities that I wanted to work with,
Yeah.
marginalized communities in the area of Los Angeles, so that I could, you know, not just help in those situations as much as I could as an undergraduate student, but
Yeah.
also learn about the complexity of the healthcare system and its pitfalls and what I want to do in the future in order to tackle those. And so I guess, yeah, the way I navigated that was really immersing myself in the community within the healthcare context
Yeah.
in order to, you know, really see the why I was taking physics and struggling through it, because
That's
it's like at the
yeah.
end of the tunnel of, okay, if I get through this class, I can go out there and be in those spaces to, you know, be in partnership with the communities and improve health.
Yeah. That's now that makes total sense. That's all I can say. Because sometimes I'll be sitting like I remember sitting in physics and being like, what does normal force have anything to do with what's going on to folks who need like help? Like that has nothing to do with anything. No one cares.
Yeah.
But I think the way that you painted it of just like it is kind of, I don't want to say a means to an end, but it is like something you do have to go through. And I know that's something they test on the MCAT. And then when you do that, then you're able to do that disparity check. So sometimes the class literally may have no correlation ever,
Mhm.
which is something you've got to kind of roll with the punches and move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
And I think also another like just getting another way I tackled that was also just being open to different experiences that I may
yeah,
have in mind. Um, for example, like after my freshman year of undergrad, I jumped into being an orientation coordinator full time for the summer at LMU. And it was not something I could have ever predicted, but that job
yeah,
opportunity showed me like it gave me so many skills in terms of communication, management, like organizing groups of thousands of people, sort of customer service, which is also in healthcare. Um,
yeah.
so just being open to different, you know, diverse experiences like that, because you never know what you're going to learn from it and who you're going to meet and, you know, how those lessons can be applicable in the future.
Yeah, side note, I just want to add. So I didn't say it, but I also went to LMU. Me and Camila did not know each other before, which is a whole other like origin story of
Yeah.
how we met each other at Berkeley. But just for some perspective, being an orientation leader, particularly in the years we went, was so chaotic. But you're right that there's like a lot of skills you learn because you have to manage a lot of personalities, a lot of people. There are a couple of years where y'all had large groups of students and it was not okay.
Yeah.
So in regards to like managing that, but you're totally right that sometimes those jobs that may be on your resume may look like kind of like off jobs. You're like, whoa, like why'd you do that? Or sometimes some most like rewarding jobs in regards to skills or like managing 30 people. It could be very helpful if you're like doing occupational safety work and like an industrial site where you got to manage 30 like adults, or in the healthcare system where you're managing 30 patients. So it's not just you can kind of look outside of like the job title and stuff like that. So that's really awesome. Um, and I think I want to follow up with kind of a more specific question on like, have you seen any overlap, particularly in your work with public health and medicine, with occupational health or EHS in kind of like any way?
Yeah, I don't think you can do medicine or public health without considering.
I feel like that was like I said it out loud and I was like,
I,
hmm.
I mean, I think if
Yeah,
you're not, I think all in the context of anything related to health, which is
right.
almost everything, unless I mean everything impacts your health, right?
You're right.
You need to have an integrative perspective,
Yeah,
because if you don't, then you're gonna neglect someone or some group or some community or overlook something that's, you know, very important.
right.
And so you know, occupational health, especially with it when you're looking at, you know, families or people in lower socioeconomic statuses, or communities that have been, you know, impacted by institutional racism and
Right.
historically, you know, been oppressed where they work, where people live, the quality of those spaces, the
Yeah.
protections and regulations, whether they are there or are severely lacking, that all impacts, you know, their overall health. And so I think you need to look at that. And the MPH at Berkeley has really allowed me to dive deeper into how different spaces can look
Yeah.
and why they were created in the first place, in order to divide
Yeah.
people. And um yeah, so I really want to dive deeper into that and learn more. And I've been able to get a glimpse of it through some of the research I did as my internship for the MPH. Uh,
Yeah.
I was able to work on a qualitative project under the Greater Chamacos study done
Oh,
through
cool.
Berkeley and UCSF. And in the study I worked on, we looked at perceptions of Alzheimer's and dementia among Latinas in Salinas, California.
Uh-huh.
You know, some of the women that we interviewed were agricultural workers, you know, working in the fields in Salinas or would take care of children. And even though we weren't talking about asthma or we weren't talking about pesticide exposure, it still comes up, right? Because that's
Yeah.
the communities are worried about. That's something that the communities are hearing about. And not just for their own sake, but the sake of their children and their children's children and all that. So even though we were talking about Alzheimer's and dementia, like everything is interconnected, right? You can't just
Literally.
be affected by one thing and it doesn't affect the rest of your body.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really important to look at, you know, even though say we are like talking about awareness of, you know, symptoms of dementia or symptoms of Alzheimer's, you also need to work with the community to see, okay, what are the regulations in place for these farm workers? What is the you know, levels of pesticide within the community and all these kinds of things because it's still impacting them.
Yeah. And I'll sprinkle a little bit of EHS for folks that don't know, like, particularly with folks who work in like agricultural fields, like that stuff just doesn't stay on the field. It's like, it's like on your hands and your nails. And then when they go home and they're like touching their kids, even if they wash their hands, take a shower, it's still there. And so if they hug their child or touch their like kids like toys and then the kid touches it, because we all know kids like touching their face and stuff, that's how sometimes kids who maybe have never been near agricultural field in their life are still exposed to the same like pesticides that their parents, you know, were kind of working within. And so that's just a little sprinkle of EHS that's not too crazy. And then also now there's this thing called Ag Pass or something like that, in the vineyards where during like the fires and stuff like that, some of the vineyard owners were trying to get this permit to make their workers stay and work during wildfires while they can leave, which is a whole nother problem. And like, feel free to look that up. Whoever wants to look that up, it's really problematic. I don't know why it's still around, and it's very reminiscent of some historical stuff that has
Yeah.
happened,
So
and
it's today and it's yesterday and it's years ago and it's
it's years
unfortunately
ahead if we don't.
tomorrow, tomorrow unless we, you know, you and I and others start
Right.
changes. But yeah,
Right.
I think my approach to medicine or health, just I wouldn't even say just medicine. I think my approach to
Life.
health in general,
Yeah.
just look, it people say, oh yeah, it's so complex and so we have to focus on this aspect and this, that. And I personally think that you can't just silo all of these issues because they're so interconnected, and
Right.
just it's harder to look at them in a more complicated sense, like doesn't mean you shouldn't put the effort to do it. It's like doing
Right.
on hard to reach communities, and it's like, why are they so hard to reach? Because you don't want to go there or because you're
Good
comfortable
question.
from afar?
Right. Where I'm like, it's only like things are only impossible until you do it. Like, and then you realize, oh, it's actually not that hard. And sorry, like racism is not simple. So addressing racism or systemic racism, institutionalized racism is not going to be easy. So you saying it's not easy, you're acknowledging the complexity of what it is. Okay, so now what do we do? we create complex methods or solutions to complex problems, you know? Like, no one said that about physics. Physics is complex, you know? So
Yeah, things that target all of these issues that we see. For example, in the study, we saw that, you know, people were worried about pesticide exposure. People were also worried about housing insecurity.
yeah,
And that's something you have to you have to make an effort to help in that sense as well, because you can't just be like, well, you know, this is the only information we needed and everything else, good luck. You know, thank you for
that's not our job.
yeah, that you can't do that, especially when
Yeah,
everything impacts people's health and well-being, and everyone deserves to have a long and healthy life.
right. Okay. So I'm glad you ended on that, because that leads into my next thing, because I want to circle back to what we had touched or actually mentioned earlier in your intro, which is that you are in the joint medical program. So again, congratulations. That's very huge, especially as a fellow person of color. That's a big deal. So can you talk kind of more about that program? What is the joint medical program for those who are curious about it? And what is so unique about that program in regards to healthcare and how it's discussed and approached? Yeah.
Yeah, the joint medical I'm starting in August, but I can already
Oh,
speak.
August. Oh, I said fall. Yeah, it's like 2 months.
I can already speak. I mean, I applied for a reason. I'm really excited
Yeah,
to be in the program because it is a one of a kind program.
yeah.
Actually, you know, UCSF has its own medical school, right?
Hmm.
But sort of like this is a partnership with UC Berkeley. And it consists of a small cohort of 16 students
Yeah.
that spend so the whole program is 5 years long. You spend the first 2.5 years at Berkeley studying the foundations of medicine and also concurrently doing a master's of science. Um,
Okay.
and during those 2.5 years, you not only learn about medicine through a problem-based learning style, but you also are able to take classes throughout the entire school of UC Berkeley. So you can take law classes, sociology classes, environmental classes, you know,
I
English,
wouldn't recommend environmental classes.
anything, pottery, whatever you want, right? Um, so you get a very diverse perspective and
Yeah.
the ability to essentially learn whatever you want to learn, and that can you know, shape the way you learn medicine too. And then
Hmm.
the last 2.5 years you are at UCSF
Okay.
doing rotations. um so yeah, the program is, you know, very community focused and
Yeah.
allows you to learn medicine and talk about medicine in a way that prioritizes people
Isn't
and
that crazy?
humanizes
Medicine people?
medicine. And you know, also allows you to learn more about what you're interested in and applying that to medicine. So for example, if you want to dive into sociology and dive into critical theory, or if you want to dive into gender and women's studies, or
Hmm.
whatever it may be, and take that and apply it to healthcare, you know, it
Yeah.
gives that flexibility to do so and also talk about it with your peers. The case-based you get to go over specific cases in order to
Oh,
understand
cool.
medicine. And I think that really humanizes it, because you're not just doing a multiple choice question on some obscure health fact
Yeah,
that
it's like this
never
really
it
happened.
is. You actually like there is a person behind these symptoms and
Right.
you are the one communicating with them and also caring about them.
Right.
Yeah, it's a really unique program that really prioritizes health equity, and so I'm very excited to be in it.
And you're also collecting degrees, because now you're at like 4. You're gonna be at 4 in like 5 years. 5 years. Yeah. That's crazy. You're gonna be at 4. That's awesome and just dope, and also inspirational to just see that happen. I just as an outsider looking in, but also very supportive and like cheerleader on the side. So that's awesome.
Hi
So I'm
guys,
gonna
this is
do
Tyra Parrish, your host for this episode, and we have reached the end of part 1 of this conversation with this amazing speaker. Don't click out yet, because part 2 to this conversation has already been posted. So go ahead and click over to the next page, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and Spotify page.